Custom Code says, I was once asked in an interview, tell me about a time you failed. I think I messed up the answer. How should someone answer that question the right way? Okay, so there's two kind of parts to this. One of the standard job interview questions that they always ask in one way, shape, or form is, what are your weaknesses? Or what is your weakness? Some variant of that, okay? That's the king of the trick questions, right? Normally the way it works is, if you ask a recruiter, how should I answer that question? This is what they'll say. They'll say, oh, you should be honest and admit when you failed and what your weaknesses are. All we want to know, they got a big smile on their face, they're wearing that mask. All we want to know is that you're working on yourself. We just want to know that, just so that you're self-aware and you realize that you're not a god and, you have limits and weaknesses and you're working to improve yourself. That's all we want to know, right? Ding, like the smile, right? BS. It's totally self-serving. What actually ends up happening in the vast majority of situations in the real world, in actual job interviews, is that they say, tell me about a time you failed, or like, what are your weaknesses? And you say, where do I start? Here's a weakness of mine. I'm an alcoholic. Here's another weakness of mine. I get very violent when people tell me I'm wrong. And that's happened a few times on the job, right? And they say, thank you for being, so open and disclosing this freely. It's really refreshing to hear a candidate who just can level with you, and then they eliminate you because of the thing you said, right? You walked right into an ambush, right? So it's a very lazy way to run a job search campaign. You're talking to X many people. You've got to eliminate all but one. Well, let's ask this question. If we could eliminate you, why would we eliminate you? And you say, if you eliminated me, it would probably be because you discovered that, I don't understand the concept of appropriate conduct in the workplace. I've never understood that. I mean, if I want to walk around with no pants, hey, it's a free country. I can walk around with no pants. You can't tell me I don't have the right to do that wherever I feel like it, right? And they go, well, thank you. It's great that, you're so candid about disclosing that, right? And then they eliminate you, right? You know what I mean? I'm obviously picking some obviously stupid examples, but hopefully you get the point, right? Now, the question you asked, tell me about a time you failed. First of all, that's a behavioral question. So they're not asking for like a concept. They're asking for a story. Tell me about a time you failed. It's a behavioral question. You're going to answer in some variant of the STAR format, right? STAR, situation, task, action, result, right? Okay. Now, this question eliminates a lot of rookies, a lot of young people who don't have a lot of experience with this. If you talk about a time where you failed for something like serious, you've just eliminated yourself, right? Well, there was this one time where, we were playing with explosives and, there was a label on the box and my boss told me, to be careful with this box, right? But one thing led to another and 5 people were dead, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter how eloquently you tell the story and how you talk about how you've worked on self-improvement. You've eliminated yourself, right? Hopefully that's a silly yet obvious example, right? So the key is to answer their question, but not give anything real that eliminates you, okay? So, I don't have a ready prepared example off the top of my head to answer that. But what you would do is you would think of a story from your past where you failed in some trivial way. You failed by some silly standard. Your boss wasn't happy about something, but they were an idiot. You know what I mean? Or something, you misheard something, or they didn't express themselves clearly, and you got mixed messages and you went ahead and did something, and that kind of thing, right? Now, I would not go to ChatGPT for this type of question because you need to tell a story from your past, and if you're just telling a generic story that you got off the internet or you heard from someone else, if they find out about that raises some serious red flags, okay? Because you're showing a lack of integrity. You're lying to them, essentially. You didn't fail like that. That's a canned story, right? But the thing is, you would tell a story where you failed. This is an interesting challenge, where you failed in a trivial way, right? So, for example, the other thing I would do is I would not use perfectionism, right? Because that's just a no-no. They know about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've heard that one before, right? What's your greatest weakness? Oh, I'm a perfectionist. It's like, yeah, BS. You would have to tell something that at least sounds real. Okay? So, I would tell it like you answer the weakness question, where, how do you answer the weakness question, by the way? Let's cover that, because I think a lot of people are interested. They say, what is your weakness? Right? And this is the answer I'd recommend. Think of an aspect about yourself that's that's good, but there's a trade-off. Okay? For example, I'm very diligent. I do things very, very well. But what's the side effect of that? I'm not the fastest worker, right? You could do it the other way around. What's a great trait of you? Oh, I work fast. I don't like people that take forever to do something that could be done in like 2 minutes. I like to get things done. That's a great trait. Sometimes you really need those people to keep things moving, right? What's the unfortunate side effect? Oh, well, every once in a while, something isn't done perfectly, right? So that side effect, that's what you say is your weakness. Your weakness is a legitimate weakness. Occasionally I make mistakes, right? But it's presented as an understandable side effect of something you do that's awesome, right? Why is it that every once in a while I make a mistake? It's because I do 3 times the work volume of every other worker, I'm that much more productive. I believe in keeping things moving, right? So that's how you answer. You give that. But the icing on the cake is if at the end you say that you do something, you can say that you do something that directly neutralizes the weakness. What do you do that makes sure that that weakness never becomes a problem, right? So you could say, like, for example, occasionally I make a mistake. It's because I do such a high volume of work. Not everything is done perfectly 100% of the time. Occasionally, something is not done correctly, right? But what I do is I check in with my boss verbally at the end of the day, and I say, how is everything I've done? Have you noticed any issues that I need to fix? And sometimes the boss will say, well, that one actually wasn't done right. He's like, not a problem. I'll get on that, and I'll do it right before I walk out the door. Just it takes a couple minutes. So that way, even the stuff I miss, it never ends up being a problem. I'm just making this up as I go along, but that's the formula, right? I give an understandable side effect of something I do that's awesome, and then I do this additional step at the end that makes sure that that weakness never ends up being a problem. And that way they can't eliminate you for the weakness. And you've also used the questions to tell them 2 awesome things that you do. 2, right? Why am I doing this? Who does that? 2 things, right? You don't do this. That means something else. 2 awesome things about you that you've snuck in there, right? So you would tell a story that illustrates this, okay? When they ask you that question. And it might be one of the stories that you prepare for answering behavioral interview questions,